thank you everybody for coming and joining us today. It's the fourth of these Zoom tastings that we've been doing, and it's one we're really excited about. Rioja is a really lovely classic region to be tasting, and this is our favourite. We've had the Murrieta Reserva, the red, for some time. It's been in the shop since we opened. The white is very new to us, so it's only been in for a month and a half or so in the shop. Really good, lovely feedback from people, including us. So we're really happy to have that. So hopefully they are to hand, your glasses are to hand, you're on mute if you need to be, without too much further ado, I will introduce Borja from Marques de Murrieta, and thank you for joining us today, Borja.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you're going to pull an exciting trick that we last saw when we had the Chateau Moussard tasting. So those of you who've been joining us for the whole series, I believe you're going to recommend that when we get started, we'll do the red first.
Yeah, we are. Okay. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining. And thank you for being today here in this format, which is something that is adapting. Well, I mean, we are all adapting to this kind of format in the last few months, obviously to these circumstances that we're going through. But nevertheless, I think it's a very, very good format to get to know people and to actually taste wine. Why not? I saw before. Well, I see some people gathering together in one house. There was like kind of a party in another house going on already, you know. So fantastic, you know, great to have you all. So before we taste the wines, we're going to have two wines. And then I'll give you a little explanation about another winery that we actually have in Spain. I'd like to go through, first of all, through the history of Marques de Murrieta, because I think it's very, very important that you learn and understand who are we before tasting the wines, because it actually will allow you to understand the wines once you know a little bit of the history. Okay, so the origins of Marques de Murrieta go back to the 19th century when a gentleman called Luciano de Murrieta, that was an entrepreneur, not only an entrepreneur, but a visionary well ahead of his time, built the emblematic Castillo Higay in his Higay estate in Logroño, in La Rioja, and made it the headquarters of Marques de Murrieta until nowadays. Okay, we've been, Luciano de Murrieta made his first wine in 1852, and he only started because while living in England, he was born in Peru. His father was Spanish, his mother was from Bolivia. Then they went back to Spain, and after that he went to live to England. And while living in England, he joined a wine club. And in this wine club, the only wines that he could actually find and drink were really fine French wines, ports, and from Spain, the only wines that he could find and drink were sherries. So he was like quite shocked about the bad reputation that Spanish wines had at the time. So he thought he had to do something about it. I mean, at the end of the day, La Rioja in this case and Bordeaux nowadays is not even a 3-hour drive. It's like fairly close. And he thought, like, why the French can do such a great wines, having more or less the same weather conditions and everything. We have the vines, we have everything in Spain, but we're not doing the same kind of quality wines. So he decided to go and live in France, in Bordeaux, to learn winemaking. So after finishing his studies, he imported those techniques into Rioja. And not only the techniques, but the tools as well. Mainly the use of oak barrels. So it was in 1852 when the first Rioja wines, as we know Rioja wines nowadays, was released. So in a way, we were the first ones in making wine in Rioja. Okay, so the legend of Rioja wines started with a wine released by Marques de Murrieta in 1852. Then the years went by, and he bought this Igay estate, where he built the Castillo Igay, the castle that I mentioned earlier, and with only 150 hectares. And we say only. It was a big amount of land, big piece of land, but it's quite small compared to other producers in La Rioja. Okay. Then the years went by. Luciano died at the beginning of the 20th century, and then another side of the family of it was actually his nephew who took over the business, because Luciano died without getting married. He didn't have any children, so he was one of his nephews who took over the business with great success for a few years. And 2 generations after, we're talking now about almost the end of the 20th century, it was in the 80s, the actual family comes into play. And it was Vicente Cebrián, who was another businessman from Spain, having a dinner with the Murrieta family at the time. They said that they were thinking about selling the business. And Vicente Cebrián thought, I might have a business opportunity here. It was the 80s, and in the 80s, Spanish wines, and especially Gran Reservas from Rioja, were booming. Everybody were drinking and buying these wines, no? Because compared to French wines, the value for money that you were getting, it was incredible, no? So he thought, like, well, I'm going to go for it. So he bought, in 1983, he bought the estate from the Murrieta family. And one of the first things he did is to actually invest in improving not only the facilities, but improving the quality and buying even more land. So actually, right now, we have 300 hectares of land. And you think like, wow, that might be a lot. And yes, it's a lot. And we are actually the biggest single wine estate from La Rioja. But that doesn't mean that we're the biggest in terms of production. We're fairly small in terms of production compared to the big producers in La Rioja. I can tell you that 300 hectares, we only do about 1.2 million bottles a year. You have producers in Rioja that can do up to 10, 12, 15 million bottles a year. How do they do that? Obviously, they may have a lot of land, but all the land that they have might be spread all over the region. We are not. We have a chateau concept. The winery is right in the middle of the state. Okay, so these allow us actually to control everything that we do. We don't buy grapes from anyone. We don't sell grapes to anyone. We don't buy wine. Everything that we do comes from our own land. You know, so that is another thing that makes us unique in Rioja. Okay, so 1983, Vicente Cebrián buys the estate, and in 1996, this Vicente Cebrián, this gentleman, passed away at the age of 47. So he was very, very young. And it was his son, Vicente Dalmau, who had to take over the business at the age of 26. So there was a lot of speculation in the industry about what was going to happen with Marques de Murrieta, with this incredible winery, this iconic winery from La Rioja. A lot of people didn't believe that the new people in charge, which it was Vicente Dalmau, and his sister Cristina, were going to be able to take this business to a good shore, because they were young and people thought that they were inexperienced. But that was very, very far from true, because since the very, very early age, Vicente Cebrián, the father, when he bought the estate, he built a house in the estate and moved with his family there. And Vicente, Vicente Dalmau, actual president and owner of the group, since the age of 16, he was actually working at the winery, mainly on weekends to get his pocket money. He was showing the estate and the winery to tourists while studying and while being in university. His father appointed him export director. So he was actually combining his studies in university with traveling around the world, you know. And after finishing his studies, he was named managing director of the company or the winery, obviously under the look of his father. So he had some experience, okay? So it was 1996 when Vicente Dalmau took over the business. And since then, it's been actualized and has developed his exporting activities. We are now in almost 100 countries. So we get to travel a lot. Obviously not this year, but I take care of Europe mainly, and I actually travel to Russia and all of that, but I take care of Europe, and I'll travel around 110, 120 days a year. So imagine how busy we get with the export business. Mm-hmm. And what Vicente did in 1996 is surrounding himself by a very young and motivated team. And I can tell you that most of the people that started in 1996 working with Vicente Dalmau are still in the team. And I'd like to obviously give a big important, or mention a very important person in this business and in this adventure that started in 1996, which is Maria Vargas. Maria Vargas is the head winemaker. She was appointed head winemaker in Murrieta at the age of 24. Okay, so very, very young, because Vicente saw something in her. And I can tell you that Tim Atkin, back in 2016, appointed Maria Vargas as best winemaker of the world. Okay, so a lot of the things that we do, and obviously what you're gonna taste today, is thanks to Maria, and she has a great capability of developing incredible things when we have the good conditions for it. But as well, he is incredible at doing things when we have very challenging vintages, you know. And I can give you an example. 2013 was a really tough and challenging year, and she did an incredible wine that was sold in about 7-8 months, you know, almost 1 million bottles. So that gives you an idea of how important she is as well in the business. Okay, so obviously in the new years and in the new since 1996, Marques de Murrieta has won awards all over the world, and in more than 665 years of his foundation, we have become a benchmark for quality wines in the world. Okay, so this is a little introduction about who we are, and now we're gonna see what we do. Okay, which are the two wines that we have with us. So we have Marques de Murrieta Reserva Red, 2015, and then we have Capellania, which is here. I see some of you have a glass of wine in their hands. Please put that to one side, because we're going to start with the red. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Why is this? I think it's something that you're going to realize once we start the tasting. Capellania is a big wine. It's a big wine, this white wine. It's an incredible wine, very versatile in terms of food pairing, you know, and it's something that we actually like to say that Capellania is a white wine with the soul of a red wine. Okay, so that's why we're gonna start with the red. Okay, I already poured my wines just a little bit before we started this tasting, so I have them already here. So what we're gonna start is with the Marques de Murrieta Reserva Red, which is a blend of those 300 hectares that we have in the Igai estate. Most of all of our wines, but two, are single vineyard wines. Okay, so the single vineyard wines are the top wines, and then we have Reserva, which is the wine that we have first here, 2015, and Gran Reserva. So these two wines, because we have the Reserva, we're going to talk about Reserva. This is a blend of 4 varietals, okay? Of those 4 varietals, obviously Tempranillo is the main grape. It's the main grape in all our red wines, okay? Tempranillo, as you know, is probably the key and the most important red grape in La Rioja, autochthonous grape, okay? So in this wine, we have about 80% of Tempranillo. Then we have a little bit of Graciano, which is 12%, 6% Mazuelo, and very tiny amount of Garnacha, which is at 2%. Something that you're gonna see a lot in Marques de Murrieta, and if you go back to a few vintages of the Reserva, and if you buy next year when the 16 is released, you'll see a lot of influence of Mazuelo and Graciano. And it's mainly because of the global warming. Global warming is a fact. I can tell you that we were talking about the 80s earlier when the actual family bought the estate in 1983. Back then, Rioja wines will be 12.5, perhaps 13% alcohol. Now we're tasting a wine that is 14% alcohol, okay? So in about 30 years, you know, the wine has gone up 1% in alcohol. So how you compensate this is giving freshness to the wine. And that freshness and that extra acidity, we get it from these two grapes, okay? Which are the Mazuelo and the Graciano, okay? What we've done a lot, or what Maria has done a lot during last years, is to play a lot with the oak as well. Here we have a wine that has been aged for 20 months, 18 months, sorry, in American oak. And then it's left in the bottle for another 2 years before it's released, okay? So it's very important to understand what is Reserva and Gran Reserva, okay? Because you will go to your local wine shop and you'll find Rioja Reserva. That is a reason for a wine called Reserva or Gran Reserva, and it's the amount of time and the aging of the wine. So a Reserva is normally a minimum of 3 years between the time that it spends in oak and the time that it spends in the bottle. And a Gran Reserva is about 5 years. About minimum of 2 years in the barrel plus 3 years in the bottle, minimum, okay? So here we have, as I said, I think a beautiful wine. As I was mentioning earlier about the 13 vintage, it was very challenging. 2 years after, we have a 15 where we definitely achieved the muscle and the structure and the freshness that Marques de Murrieta were looking for after this challenging 2013, okay? I don't know what you get, but the key word for all the Murrieta wines, doesn't matter if you're drinking the Reserva or our really top Castillo y Gay Gran Reserva, which is released after, not every year, but when it's released, it's normally released after 10, 11 years. The main thing that you'll find in these wines is freshness. Are wines that can be drunk by the noble wine drinker or by the expert wine drinker. Is the kind of wine that everybody's gonna like, okay? You go to your shop and you don't know anything about wine and you go and say like, oh, well, have a dinner with friends. What do I buy? This is what you can buy. But the expert wine drinker that goes to the local wine shop and see a bottles of Marques de Murrieta will buy that because he knows or she knows that there is quality behind these wines, okay? So obviously it's the freshness, the fruit, incredibly well integrated oak. You see it's a 2015, which is almost 5 years old already, and it's still very young, you know? But those tannins are incredibly soft. The beauty of this kind of wines, when you come to Rioja and you're drinking about Reservas or Gran Reservas, I always say that these kind of wines are like a human, you know? They get born, and they grow, you know, they get to speak in life. But unfortunately, we humans, when we get to our peak in life, we start to, you know, go down, 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 and then we die. With this kind of wines, the beauty of it is that when we get to our peak, they get to speak in life, they might stay here for decades to come, you know? And you can drink a 2001 Reserva, and you'll be amazed. It's a Reserva, not a Gran Reserva, but you'll be amazed that a wine that is almost 20 years old is still as fresh, you know? And it's still, and it can give you still what you're really looking for in a wine. You know? This is the beauty of Reservas from Rioja, and this is the beauty of Marques de Murrieta, you know? So something that I always said, and I insist a lot, the value for money that you get from Marques de Murrieta is unbeatable. I always say, go to with 20 pounds or 25 pounds to your wine shop and try and buy a wine of this quality from France, for example. It's tough. It's tough, you know? Something that you can buy a case. I always say, like, buy 2 cases of this. 2 cases. You can keep one in your cellar for decades, so 20 years, and drink the other bottle, you know? And it's a great investment. You're buying something for just over 20 pounds, and then in 20 years, you open up a bottle and think, wow, you know, I could sell this for 100 now, or something like that, okay? So what we get mainly, being 2015 is still young, and it's a wine that the freshness, all the fruit that you have, you know, but it hasn't developed yet the leather, all these aromas and flavors that you may find in all wines, you know. Being 5 years old, you look at the color and it's still have that purpley color in it, you know. So this is the beauty of this wine, okay? If any of you wants to comment or say anything about the wines, please feel free, raise your hand and say, okay?
I just sort of say this is the wine that brought us to Murrieta. I have tried 4 or 5 other vintages of this wine. The 13 was incredible because it was such a difficult vintage, and it produced something so light and so interesting. There was such an aroma characteristic to it, which this, you know, there is muslin here. I prefer, in most cases, a Reserva to a Grand Reserva because I think this is the right amount of oak. I think unless you really make something to leave for 20 years, you really don't need a Grand Reserva. I would always go for a Reserva. And what Murrieta's wines have done, in my experience, is they've got that balance between the oak and the fruit right, and the oak is there to lift the fruit up. It elevates and shows off, and I've still got some really fresh blackberry fruit after 5 years, which, you know, is really difficult to achieve. It's almost like you squeezed a blackberry off a bramble just now, and that fruit is so fresh. Meanwhile, you've also got a little bit of sort of matchstick. There is that nice hint of wood in there, and there's some cedar and some complexity and some depth. I imagine if we were saving the presence of any vegetarians, but if any of you have got sort of a leg of lamb sort of sitting by, and if you have a leg of lamb with this, and you spend an evening with the lamb and the Rioja, then the taste experience you get from both of them is kind of mutually beneficial, and it'll build to a huge crescendo as you go on. I won't monopolise this chat bit, but just to say this is what I'm looking for in a Rioja. Is this just, yeah, the fruit is in charge, the fruit has led the way, and then everything that's been done to it is just making it more beautiful and more long-lived.
Yeah. And it's something that's very interesting what you're saying, because you're talking a lot about the fruit, but I don't know if any of you have drank those wines that I was talking earlier about the 80s, no? How we have developed or how we have changed over the years, the style. And it's true that obviously when Vicente Dalmau had to take over the business, in his mind, when you're making wine, you cannot think 1 year ahead. And especially when you do these kind of wines, you have to think about 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 60, 100 years ahead. So what happened in the 80s, which it was great for Rioja, because Rioja wines were booming around the world. People were looking for those very heavy oak, you know, and it was like drinking those wines at the time were like licking a piece of wood, basically, you know. What happened in the 90s suddenly is that wines from the New World started to take over. And all these wines from Australia, South Africa, Chile, Argentina, which were bringing all this freshness, they were pure fruit, they were very easy to drink, you know, started to take over the trade. And in a way, Rioja had to adapt to that. You know, we were losing our position and we were losing customers for that. And Vicente realized that. But the thing is that when you want to change your style, you have to think that when you're the first winery from Rioja, you want to change your style, but you cannot lose your identity. So changing the style is extremely difficult. It's not something that you can do from one vintage to the other, you know? So that's why over the years, you know, and see, I mean, Vicente has been in the business since, or he took over the business at the age of 26. He's 47 now, you know? So, oh, sorry, 47. He's 50 now, 50. So he's been, you know, over these 24 years, he's been, you know, slowly changing little things to get to this. And what are those little things? Using a little bit less of oak, using a little bit of less new oak, adding a little bit of extra these other varietals to give it more freshness, you know, those other varietals becoming more important than even the Tempranillo itself, because you're going to have to use Tempranillo always. But at the end of the day, when you want to do something new, you know, you cannot shock the market, you know, saying like, I'm doing this Tempranillo and next year it's totally different, no? So, and in fact, if you look at all the wineries in Rioja, we are well ahead of them because Murrieta took the decision earlier. And I'm sure that the other wineries were looking at what Murrieta was doing, you know, thinking like, okay, if they do well, we're just going to have to start following the path. If they don't do well, well, it's their loss, not our loss. So I can tell you that most wineries in Rioja are starting to do or are doing this kind of wines now, because we have to adapt to that, you know. And I love what Michael said, you know, it's like freshness and fruit, and it's a reserva, you know. And there are a lot of people out there that when they hear the word Rioja, they think about old-fashioned, very oaky wines, you know, very tired, very impossible to drink, until they try something like this. Then the minds change completely, you know, absolutely completely, you know. So definitely for those that, what I said, hear the word Rioja, oh no, I don't like Rioja. I don't like Rioja. Give them this, you know, and they'll be amazed. Even do it blind. Okay, you don't want a Rioja, don't worry. I'll give you something else, you know, hide the label, put them this wine and see what they think. And they're going to go, oh, well, this is lovely. Where is it from? It's from Rioja. And they'll be quite amazed about that. No kidding, eh? No kidding, because it has happened, eh? It has happened to me. All right. So thumbs up for this wine. Thumbs up. Great. Awesome.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
You say the wine has changed to become more like the new wines. Do you personally think that's an improvement, or did you prefer the Rioja the way it was before?
No. I don't say that it's an improvement. It's a change of a style. It's a totally, which is what I said earlier. We change the style without losing the identity. You know, expert wine drinkers will drink this blind and they'll know it's a Rioja. You know, so basically it's just a change of a style, but not of identity. You know, it's true that the wines are totally different, but it's at the end of the day, it's a matter of adapting to times. I always compare winemaking with, I don't know, fashion, for example. You know, you don't wear the same clothes that you used to wear in the 90s or in the 80s, or you don't have the same haircut. You know, this is the same. You, at the end of the day, you adapt to times. You know, and you have to, I don't know if you say this in English, but or either you generate yourself or you die. You know, this is what we've done. You know, we just change the style. I'm not saying that those ones are the ones from before are better than these, because we actually have really, really top wines kept at the winery, which are almost 100 years old. And actually, there was a tasting last year in Austria of only Castillo y Gai, which is the big wine from Marques de Murrieta. And in that tasting, they tasted one of our wines from 1925. You know, we're talking about wine that is 95 years old. Well, that wine in that tasting got 100 points. And it's a list that was released not long ago. It's the Falstaff points. And Castillo y Gai got in that tasting about 400 or 500 points wines, you know, and one of them was a 1925. So you see, the Castillo y Gai that we do nowadays is totally different in terms of style. Our Castillo y Gai now comes from a single vineyard. Before, it was done like this, Reserva, a little bit of grapes from all the state, you know. It's just not better or worse, it's just different, but it's still incredibly good, you know.
Do you use French oak at all?
Mm-hmm. We do, mainly by tradition. Everybody has been using American oak in Rioja, but we use French oak, and that's great that you mention it, because the white wine that we're gonna taste now is aged in French oak. Okay, so if you want to, we can move on to the next wine. Are you ready for it?
I think so. We've had one comment that we're getting towards some of the dried fruits in there, and I think you can sort of see dried cranberry where it's still fairly fresh towards the end of that.
Yeah. I mean, you get in this one, you get licorice. You can get licorice. You get even orange peel, a little bit. You know, a little bit of the balsamic is there. Blackberries. You know, it's, yeah. I mean, so still easy to drink, but it's still quite complex in the nose, you know. I mean, you get a lot of things, and actually, as the wine opens up, it actually starts to become more like I always said, like our Reserva is like a teenager, you know. It's like very fresh, very alive, you know. But as you open it and it starts to settle down, and you know, it tastes completely different in 1 hour time. It'll be a totally different, a grown-up kind of wine, you know. And that's another beauty of Rioja wines, how they develop.
So just supposing we were to leave this for another, if we left this for 15 years, what do you think, how do you think our tasting notes are going to change forward?
Well, a lot, obviously. They'll change because you get some oxidation in the wine, but the freshness is something that is always going to be there, you know, and that's the beauty that you get, you know. Obviously, you get more, what we were saying earlier about the leather and all these kind of like more oldie kind of aromas. And definitely in 15 years time, you open this wine and you need to let it breathe for an hour or so. But the wine, the color, first of all, yeah, it will be a lot more orange kind of way, but it'll be extremely bright, very, very bright, you know. And the aromas obviously will be totally different, but when you put it in your mouth, the freshness will still be there, you know, because that acidity at the end of the day is extremely important. Acidity is natural preservant, you know, and allows the wine to develop very, very slow during the time, because that acidity at the end of the day is holding the wine, you know. So, and that acidity will be fading away very, very slowly, and you'll have a totally different wine. But still, I drank last year 2001 of this, and that's what I was mentioning 2001 earlier to you, and it was spectacular. And that wine was sold at the time for like £5 or something like that. So that gives you how these wines they are not only to drink but actually to keep, you know. Don't be afraid of it, you know. Okay, awesome. Great. Okay, well, we had a little bit of different tasting now, starting with a red and finishing with a white. But now, once you not only smell the wine and you taste the wine, you're going to understand why we done this. Okay, Capellania is a single vineyard. This wine is made of 100% Viura grape, and is planted 485 meters above sea level, which is on the highest part of the winery. Okay, and it's actually where we have the Castillo y Gay red grapes as well. So in this area, we have it in a U shape kind of thing, all the red planted that is used for Castillo y Gay red, and in the middle of the U shape, we have the vines of Viura. Okay, this is actually this 2015 was normally harvested in Rioja starts normally the end of September. 2015 was quite hot year, so this one actually was harvested mid-September, very early harvest. And we do, being single vineyard and having such a small area of land for this wine, we only have 6 hectares of this wine. Obviously, the production is very limited. In this case, actually, the 2015, it says here, we did only 54,000 bottles. Okay, 54,000 bottles for almost 100 countries. And of those 100 countries, almost 50% stays in Spain. So it gives you about just over 22,000 bottles, or 27,000 bottles for export. So it's not a big amount of wine for it, and for the price the same, unbeatable value for money. Okay, so everything is hand-picked, and that's something that I didn't mention earlier, but in Murrieta, everything is hand-picked. We don't use any kind of machinery or anything like that. And we have an incredible tradition in making white wines, and we've been making white wines since the beginning of times. And in fact, Castillo y Gay White, which is another white wine that we do, our Castillo y Gay White 1986 is the only dry white wine from Spain that that got in history 100 points Parker. No other white wine in Spain got 100 points Parker before. That wine was released after 30 years in 2016, after spending 252 months in oak and 67 months in a concrete tank. Okay, well, actually, this wine comes from the same vineyard that one. Okay, this plot was planted in 1945. Okay, so it's a fairly old vineyard. Okay, so what we do with this wine in the old times, we used to age it in American oak, but before they said you use French oak. Here you have it. Okay, why is this? Basically to be different to the rest. Okay, French oak gives you something special in these wines, you know. And a lot of people, when they smell this wine, they think that, or they think about Burgundy, you know, and Chardonnay, and all of that. No, once you taste the wine, you see that it's got nothing to do with Burgundy. Okay, but French oak gives it that extra personality to the wine. Okay, and to myself, I believe that this is the most versatile wine of all the wines that we do in Marques de Murrieta in terms of food pairing. You know, this wine is something that you can obviously drink with fish, but it has to be quite meaty kind of fish, you know, with salmon, with trout, sea bass, things like that. No, but this wine is the wine that I have in Christmas with roast pork, you know, and it goes really well. Michael was mentioning earlier lamb with Marques de Murrieta red. Have it with roast lamb. Incredible, you know. So it's something that we actually, when we have people over to the winery to have dinner or lunch, and we have our guests, this wine is normally served with meat. Always, you know, it's just a way of trying to change people's minds that red is for meat and white is for fish. You know, that's totally wrong. You know, 15 months in new French oak, okay, and then 2 years in the bottle minimum before it's released. Okay, so this is the current vintage. It's 2015, so it's already 5 years old, and the same with the Reserva. It's still so young, you know, and the capability of this wine to develop in the glass is extraordinary, extraordinary. Okay, and obviously I'm not going to mention about the bottle. You know, you can age these bottles for years to come. Okay, what do you think?
There's a few thumbs up on the screen, Bulger. I love it. I love it even more than when we first tried it. Yeah. Hollands love it as well. I've had this out of the fridge for over an hour, and I think it's really showing itself beautifully with a bit of temperature. I don't know how warm yours are. It's tasting beautiful.
Mm. I actually, it's a wine that we always suggest to drink cool, but not cold.
Mm.
Okay. I will say the serving temperature of this wine is between 12 to 14 degrees, approximately. Don't cool it down too much because you definitely lose all the aromas, these beautiful aromas that you can have here. You know, I love the nuts, you know, I love the dry nuts. I love the oak, the almonds, you know. What else do you get here? Lemon, a little bit of honey. It's got so much in it, so much in it. And when you put it with food, because I think it's definitely a wine that needs food to go with it. Huh? Definitely the Reserva that we had before is a wine that can be drunk on its own. You know, you get home and have a glass of red. But I like Capellana to be drunk always with food, always, you know. I don't know, give me some feedback about what do you get on the nose, Michael? I don't know. What else do you get? Because it's so complex, you know, just you can help me here.
Well, Luke's, I think.
Yeah, I was just about to say that what's really, really interesting and nice in this is while it's definitely a ripe wine, and 2015 was a ripe vintage, immediately I got this sort of lemon sherbet, really fresh and like after. But then what really struck me the most was 5 minutes after, when you were explaining about this wine, I could still taste it so clearly. So it's just such an intense and complex and changing wine. Every sort of few seconds you get another note, as I said, and you said that honey note was really, really nice.
Yeah, I get a lot of spices. It's a little bit of spicy as well. Eh? So thinking about spicy, will you have it perhaps with a mild curry, for example? I don't know. Nothing too hot, but something that can hold these spices, you know. But definitely the citrus are there. You have so much. Yeah, so much here, you know.
And then you get these lovely creamy sweet flavors.
Obviously that's the new oak. No, it's something that we don't abuse a lot. I mean, new oak is something that we use mainly with Capellana and with another red that we do, which is Dalmau. In the other wines, we like to, you know, use more used barrels in a way for wines, because we don't want to give it what I was saying earlier about that, you know, very heavy oaky kind of character that in the old times Rioja wines had, you know. So this is French oak is something that we only use in here and with Dalmau, and a little bit of in Castillo y Guy red, but just very, very tiny. Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
about how it would develop with the bottle open. So if we had it open for a few days and we're drinking it.
I think you can have it open for like 4 or 5 days, no worries whatsoever. The wine takes long to actually goes to waste, but I don't see anyone here holding this bottle for 4 or 5 days. Yeah.
I will say I decanted mine at about 1:30 today.
Wow.
And it's showing completely beautifully. I know that when we had the sample prior to stocking it, Graham took the rest of the bottle home, and sort of he found that on day 3, maybe we opened it on a Wednesday and he was drinking it on a Friday evening. It was I think he said it got even better. Having loved it at the time, it got even better on day 3. So if you have got that level of self-restraint, do by all means indulge. Or open 3 bottles at once and have 1 bottle on Wednesday, 1 on Thursday, and 1 on Friday, whichever you prefer.
You just need to come back to Great Minds to stock up.
Always on brand.
Yeah, that's it. Awesome. Okay, well, these are the 2 wines I like to, before we end up, we finish, well, it's already 20 to 6 there. So to 7, sorry. So, I mean, time flies when you drink with wines and you have a good company. I'd like to mention a small project that we have here in Spain. I'm actually here in Spain. I'm in Galicia right now, northwest of Spain. And I'm just like about 10 minutes drive from a beautiful winery that we have here. We only have 15 hectares of vines, and where we do Albariño. Okay, Albariño wines, which are Atlantic wines, is this bottle. So I suppose that okay, what a beautiful wine. 2018 is the current vintage, and people think like, wow, wine from the northwest of Spain, 2018, that's a little bit old. This wine can show you that Albariño actually can age extremely well without the need of oak. Okay, Albariño is a varietal that, being where it is planted, which is northwest of Spain, extremely humid conditions. Actually, the plants or the vines are planted on a pergola system, so it's almost like vines that are almost 2 meters tall, in order to have all the humidity blown away by the winds of the Atlantic. What you get is wines that are very, very high in acidity, and is what I mentioned earlier. Acidity at the end of the day works as an incredible preservant for wines. So you can drink Albariños, no kidding, the same, that are 20 years old, young Albariños that develop extremely, extremely well in the bottle, extremely well. So 2018 is the current vintage, and we are preparing a totally new project for Pazo Barrantes. Okay, the name of it is, you see it there, Pazo Barrantes. There is going to be a new Pazo Barrantes. So this bottle as such, 2018, are the last bottles of this project. The new Pazo Barrantes is going to be totally different, not only in terms of presentation, but as well in terms of wine. And I cannot tell you anymore, because the new Pazo Barrantes, we normally release this wine. It's always released, we'll say, around this time of the year, just a little bit before. Normally May, June is when we release this wine. The new Pazo Barrantes is not going to be released until about January, February next year. When the time comes, you'll find the reason for it. You know? But there is a lot of, obviously, of marketing strategy behind this, you know, so that's why I cannot say anymore, but stay tuned, you know, as you will say, because there is something really, really special coming up with the 2019 now. Okay, so go to Great Minds and stock up as well with this Albariño now that we have suffering all this heat wave now, and enjoy a beautiful white wine from the northwest of Spain. You know, we only do about 100,000 bottles a year of this, so very, very tiny
I'm looking
production.
forward to the sample bottles arriving.
Yeah, well, you have to speak to Adam. And if not, I'll speak to Adam. Send some samples. you know. Really. So I don't know if you have any more questions. Anything you want to say?
Just tracking back to the white.
Yeah.
Is there a sort of light skin contact at all? Because it has a really nice texture on the sides of the palette. Or would it just be from the oak, maybe, that texture you're getting?
No. There is a very short, very short skin contact. But very tiny.
Yeah.
There is no huge time of the wine in contact with the skin. Indeed, there is a little bit of a skin contact. It's very short.
Yeah.
And then the process of is a very slow process in terms of having flavor extraction and bringing all the aromatic potential into the wine. You know, I mean, but yeah, indeed, it has a little bit of a skin contact, definitely. Very tiny. All right.
I'd be really interested in, because I think so many people's, not necessarily these people, because obviously there's a great wealth of knowledge amongst the people on this call, but I'd be really intrigued as to the preference for the red versus the white. Which one was people's favourite?
Interesting. They can raise their hands.
Yeah, if so, just I think I know the way this is going to go, but let's just do it. Take of argument, and those people offline can maybe put R or W in the chat. If you preferred the red, would you raise your hand? Hooray! 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you preferred the white, would you raise your hand? Gosh, okay. Oh, that didn't go quite the way it went. So it's about 50-50, which is really cool.
Oh, it's great. Another question. You all like both? Raise your hands.
Which way you go, Michael? You were white, were you?
I was. I was really delighted with it. I think I'd had it cooler the last time, and this has been definitely, this is definitely sort of just below room temperature. It's probably sort of 14-15 degrees, and I'm absolutely loving the length of it. The red is delightful, but I already knew the red was delightful, and I think tonight the white is won.
Yeah.
For me.
They're all both super, though. Both super.
Thanks, man.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Any more questions?
So,
cheers, guys.
So just before we go, thank you so much, Morgan, for coming along. It's been a lovely evening.
My pleasure.
Really great to hear a bit more of the history of the Murrieta, a bit about how the wine is produced. Hopefully, we all know a little bit about Rioja, and this has just sort of augmented what we already knew. We've got a, as you know, if you bought the whole tasting box, there is an old Albarino in there, which, Albarino, not that old, but that definitely has oak. So we'll see how that's gone down, and hopefully compare it with yours when we get to try it. Thank you so much. Is there any final sort of remarks or questions that anyone has, or otherwise we'll sort of maybe wrap it up and leave the mics on and people can just have a little chat before we do it.
Delicious, thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was really nice. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you all.
Great stuff.
And thank you, guys. You have a great weekend.
Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Stock up with Marques de Murrieta, and hopefully in a few months' time I'll go over to the UK and we can actually have a face-to-face kind of tasting, and we get to know each other. Okay, but definitely keep on drinking wine, which is the best way to keep your heart happy. Okay. All the best, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Salud.
Thank you.
Salud.